This is Brian Harris. I'm the creator of Independent Black Voters on Facebook. I had Marianne Williamson's folks reach out to do a interview to sit down here and talk about some of the issues prevalent to this race. Miss Williams, I had met her recently, years ago, and we hosted her over at the Eclipse Theater here in Las Vegas. So this is a kind of reunion to meet her and to talk to her. And so first of all, Miss Williams, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to sit down and talk to me.
Well, thank you for having me. It's an honor to talk to you, Brian, and I admire you for the work that you're doing.
Okay, thank you. So what we're going to do, we're going to record this. So I'd asked Miss Williams to give us an overview, because we're going to ask a lot of questions, but give us an overview on what you think are the key issues, why you ran, first of all, because obviously you're running against high high odds. You're running against the probabilities are very small to win, but sometimes winning is just being in the race. So I'd like to know why you ran and what are the key issues that made you decide to run.
Well, the things that were concerning to me and that I wanted to articulate in 2020 seem even more relevant and more urgent to me now. And that has to do with the fact that we don't have a thriving middle class anymore. We've had a $50 trillion transfer of wealth from the bottom 90% to the top 1% over the last 50 years. And it has left us in a situation where 39% of Americans report skipping meals on a regular basis in order to pay their rent. Half of American renters cannot afford that rent. It's often said that America is too expensive for Americans. A majority of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. A majority of Americans could not afford to absorb a $500 unexpected expenditure. 70% of Americans say they live with chronic economic stress. 1 in 4 Americans live with medical debt. Over 1 million Americans ration their insulin. This is not normal for an advanced democracy. And you would not find that level of chronic despair on an economic level within any other advanced democracy.
I agree with you.
And the reason our situation is the way it is because there is a matrix of corporate tyranny. And it's time for, everybody knows it. Everybody knows it. I'm not saying when I say what I just said to you, and I say this when I say it to audiences, I didn't tell you anything you don't already know. But the system, the political system, so gaslights us and has so trained us to expect so little, and has so trained us to sort of farm out our best thinking, that even though you and I talk about this, everybody we know talk about it, it's not within the mainstream political conversation to not only name it for what it is, but for enough Americans to say, hell no. Now, when I was growing up, more than not, the Democratic Party was the conduit for saying hell no.
Mm-hmm.
Today, the corporate elite that runs the Democratic Party is what the Republicans were when I was growing up. And that's why when you and I first talked today, you talked about going independent. So many people are, because it's not an accident why it's called the corporate duopoly. Because both major political parties, one much worse than the other, the Republicans much worse, but to say that you're better than the Republicans today is a very low bar. So that's why Americans who really recognize that the economic injustice that is now it's entrenched within the way America works. Corporate profits, profit maximization, short-term profit maximization for huge corporate entities, insurance companies, pharmaceutical companies, big food companies, big chemical companies, big agricultural companies, big gun manufacturers, big oil, defense contractors, their profits come first. Their profits come first. And then whatever's left, good luck to you.
Absolutely.
And even the corporate Democrats are saying, we'd like to help you so that it's not so difficult for you to survive this unjust system. My message is, why don't we end the injustice?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why I'm talking to you today. And thank you, because I wanted to get that intro and many of the things, as I said earlier. Please look at her website, because I looked at your website. I went through a lot of your videos. We're in agreement there. We have a problem right now where 1% of the people own close to 75% of the wealth. And not only have they gotten they've reduced their taxes so that they can buy the government. The government is owned. It's owned. Our Congress is owned, be they Republican or Democrat. They're owned by big business. It is now impossible. It used to be you were told that you could run, anybody in the United States could run for president. Well, now with the amount of money it costs, there's no way possible you can do that. It's being set up, it's being played, it's being done with a, you get to win this time, you get to win that time, but heads I win, tails I win. As far as as far as corporations are not people, but corporations have now set themselves up to be able to own the people's government. So I thank you, Marianne, actually just for running and having the dialogue about things other than non-economic issues. Again, go ahead.
Won't it be wonderful when there is a president who says those things?
Mm-hmm. I agree.
I'm running a president who says exactly that. The president should be there working for the people, an advocate for the people. And I think we need a president, not, when you talk about the actual issues that would be reflected in an economic U-turn and in a restoration of the American middle class, from Medicare for all, tuition-free college and tech school, removal of the college loan debt, subsidized childcare, paid family leave, affordable housing guarantee, affordable living wage, all the things which would be necessary in order to genuinely repudiate the things that you just described. No one president could come in there and in 4 years just make those things happen with a magic wand, because our president doesn't have a magic wand. But just to have a president who names it and gets the process started, that's what we need. We need an economic U-turn. We need a new beginning, and we do not need another president who pretends that it's not as bad as it is.
Yeah. Well, I believe one of the things too, and again, we as Americans have to change the dialogue. There's a purposeful attempt to keep people focused on non-economic issues on both sides of the fence. Abortion becomes an issue. And I'll go on record to say, I am neither for or against. I believe it is a woman's right to choose and a woman's right to be accountable to her maker on whatever her choices are. It should not be one of the major issues of voting in America, but it's non-economic to many people, and it's an easy way to keep the status quo while you fire up people to vote. I believe that the issues, and I'll say this, I believe that the Black community has always been used as a pawn, sometimes in both sides. We talk about woke now, we talk about it as a negative when it's about social justice, it's about equality of opportunity, but it's been renamed by each group for their purposes and used as a non-economic issue to divide the country and keep us not focused on the true enemy, which is greed capitalism. We do not have capitalism in America today. We have greed capitalism. We have monopolies that do not call themselves monopolies, that basically go in and control the economics. They determine the inflation. They squeeze every dime out, and they do it under the terms of capitalism, but it's not really capitalism. What's your thought on that, Marianne?
It's a malevolent strain of capitalism. It's unfettered. It's capitalism having been disconnected from any moral center, any sense of ethical guardrails, any sense of responsibility, a moral responsibility to people or planet. It is a strain of capitalism called crony capitalism, vulture capitalism, as you said, greed capitalism, where it is considered the fiduciary responsibility of the corporation to serve only the financial benefit of the stockholder, as opposed to recognizing there are many stakeholders here. The stockholders are stakeholders, but so's the worker, so's the community, so's the environment. So this is just stockholder capitalism that was perpetrated. It's like an economic paradigm that was perpetrated mainly by Ronald Reagan. The Republicans started it, but no Democratic president has stopped it. And it's the idea that all that the government is, the corporation is responsible for is, like I said, the fiduciary benefits of the stockholders. And they threw this canard over the, like wool over the eyes of the American people. And they said, oh, this will be good, see, because these people are going to make so much money and they're going to be job creators. And then all that money will trickle down and lift all boats. Well, clearly, we know it not only did not lift all boats, it threw millions of people off the boats they were already on. It left millions of people without a life vest. Now, why is that? Because their business model was never job creation. Their business model is job elimination. Their business model is worker exploitation. Their
And
business model is demonization of unions. Their business model is corporate subsidies. And their business model is slashing taxes, as you mentioned, for the very, very, very wealthiest among us. Now, going back again to something I mentioned before, this is the thing about this moment, Brian. I do believe that more and more Americans are beginning to see this now. You know, a lot of conservatives are beginning to see this now. A lot of people are beginning to realize, because you said they use something like abortion, they use these social issues so that people on the left think, oh, people on the right are the problem. People on the right thinking, oh, people on the left are the problem. People are starting to figure it out. No, it's the people up there who are the problem. It's not left versus right. It's the powerful versus the powerless. It's those who have capital and access to more capital versus everyone else who's just struggling to get by with whatever the system chooses to give them. And
absolutely.
and the
Let me
work and
let me throw in a plus, and this is why history is so important in true history, because if you look at what happened in American history, there really was not a problem with black or white. It was a class system, and there was a realization, and the rich realized if we can pit black against white, if we can pit poor against poor, we can basically keep our power and we can focus them on each other
right,
while we, being the main
right,
problem, are
right.
able to get away with what we do now. And you see the same things today that were perpetrated on Americans from the beginning of the creation of the United States of America.
Well, it's a working class thing is what it really is, and they don't want you to see it. So the way it works is that if you're a working class person, if you're black or white or on the left or on the right, if you're being screwed by the same people. And so it's people are, and I do think more and more people are seeing this. There were more black people and more Trump supporters on that UAW picket line. Something's really changing. And that's why I think this is a moment. If we seize history right now, there's an opening, but we have to do it.
I
We
agree.
need, yeah.
I got a couple questions I want to ask you, and then I want to jump into them specifically about the Black agenda. And as I said, the Black agenda is the American agenda. It's just the things that hit us probably twice as hard. But before I do that, here's some key issues, and I'm just going to ask right now, one of the major problems we have are Congress. The fact that Congress is fed through lobbyists, Congress is fed through corporations donating. Congress does technically insider trading and becomes millionaires. So they're not there for the people. They're there to become multimillionaires. What's your opinion on term limits? What's your opinion on should we put a stop to this insider trading? How do we take lobbyists and big corporations out of the equation? Because if these are the people that are voted in for the people and by the people, the corporations should not be controlling the outcome.
Well, as you say, we've basically turned Washington into a system of legalized bribery. And 14 years ago, they passed a Supreme Court decision called Citizens United, which gives unlimited power to these corporate interests. It's called dark money to influence political elections. I'll give you an example. In my race in the primary, just a couple weeks ago, my opponent had 4 days before the race, the television ads, just 4 days of the airwaves flooded with these television ads that were paid for by these super PACs. So it's like you said, the system is designed so that if you're not dealing with huge amounts of money or access to people have huge amounts of money, you can't get anywhere near the pinnacles of power. And then you have people who, once they are in power, in order to retain power, end up doing more in policy after policy too often to serve the short-term profit maximization goals of their donors than to serve the safety, health, and well-being of the American people. Now, given the makeup of the current Supreme Court, which is a corporatist court, it is unreasonable to think we are going to be able to overturn Citizens United anytime soon. Although this is very interesting, Josh Hawley, one of the most conservative senators in Congress, actually called for the overturn of the Citizens United recently, which was interesting, an example of that horseshoe phenomenon that I was mentioning. Ultimately, what we are going to need is a constitutional amendment establishing public funding for federal campaigns. That's not going to happen anytime soon. I think it's going to be a younger generation probably that gets that done. In the meantime, two things, and you mentioned term limits. We have to have term limits, although, as somebody pointed out to me recently, somebody can do the same damage in 12 years that they could do in 24 if they come in with that mentality and sponsored by those people. Now, this goes back to why we're here, why we're having this conversation. The only thing that we can do to override this right now, we need a political revolution at the ballot box.
Absolutely.
We need a nonviolent, peaceful march on the ballot box like you've never seen. And that's why when people say something like about a candidacy like mine, oh, you're giving a message. It is so too late for this to just be a message. No, you don't go through the brutality, the psychological and emotional and financial brutality that a situation like this represents, running for president in the environment that you've described, just to give a message.
Yes.
We've got to do this. American people, and what's interesting to me, Brian, is we have enough people in this country who already agree with everything you and I have said here today. You know, the era of data collection is over. You have said things on this phone call, which 10 years ago, I think the majority of Americans would have said, oh, well, I mean, that's going a little too far. I don't think that's true anymore. I think the majority of Americans would say, ain't it the truth? And that's why the very system you've described does everything possible to leave out of the conversation anybody who's saying it. Don't let her on CNN. Don't let her on MSNBC. Lie about her. Invisibilize her. It's a vicious system. They have no intention of letting anyone get in there who is speaking the truth that you've described, even though everything you described should be considered moderate.
Right.
All I'm saying is, well, they destroyed the middle class. We should put it back. That's all you're saying.
Yep. So let me ask you a question because I know your time is valuable and I appreciate it. Real quick, open primaries. Do you think that is a step in the right
Of course.
direction?
So what you have in Nevada is 700,000 disenfranchised people. That's why for we definitely should have ranked choice voting. We should definitely have yes on question 3 and definitely on open primary. What you have now in your primary right now, 700,000 Nevadans who are completely disenfranchised. And that's why what I'm hoping people will do is become Democrat for a day. I humbly request that you, Brian, will become a Democrat for a day. Somebody can go to a polling booth, register as a Democrat, and then, after you vote for me, go back to unaffiliated. Listen.
Well, that's what I did. I told you, actually, in the last election, I did a protest vote. I became a Republican for a day, and I voted against the status quo. This period, I'm going to vote as a Democrat for what I think the things that I want to be involved, because I shouldn't have to do that. I should be able to vote for the person of choice and not be forced to vote through party lines. So I'm in agreement with you on open primaries. I think it's very important. I want to jump to the next question again, because there are a couple I just want to hear your thoughts on them. We had started talking, again, there are issues that are prevalent in the Black community, probably more than every other group, but they're prevalent in most groups. Right now, there's a neat it's a neat commercial, but it's a scary commercial where you have black folks, they're doing the step and they say 1 in 2 black people will retire with no wealth, with zero savings. Well, if you look at it in the United States, 25% or 1 in 4 will retire with no immediate savings. So that means they really can't retire. On top of that, they're looking at destroying Social Security in the same step. They will not end Social Security as we know it because people at my age will revolt. But truthfully, by increasing the age to 70, you are effectively killing it in place.
That's what Nikki Haley wants.
Yeah. So tell me, in your, again, wealth inequality is the major issue for not just Black Americans, but all Americans. What can we do? Because we are headed towards a society of people who will be inherently working till they die. There will not be a retirement for at least 75% of the people in America and 50% of the people that are African American. And with the destruction of Social Security, which is the only safety net for many Black Americans now, you are effectively dooming people to a senior citizenship of poverty. And that's explicitly why they created Social Security in the past, was to make sure that didn't happen to our seniors.
So Social Security is the greatest anti-poverty program that's ever been created. All of us should consider it sacred, and nobody should be able to get their hands on it. We already have half of our seniors living on less than $25,000 a year. So this is what we should do. Right now, people pay Social Security up to, I think, about 168,000. We should lift that cap up to 250,000. We lift the cap up to 250,000, we will certainly be solvent. But we need to go beyond that. I'm particularly concerned about elderly women, because most men in America have paid something into Social Security. Okay, so it should be a sacred responsibility to our seniors that no senior lives in poverty in the United States. For men, if your Social Security, or women, for anyone, if you have Social Security, but it does not reach, if it does not get up to $1,200 a month, then that $1,200 should be, the compensation. The government should fill in the gap. If there's a woman, for instance, where she paid nothing into Social Security, she was a homemaker, she raised her children, then the government should give that stipend of $1,200 a month. And that is what we should do as a sacred responsibility to our elders in this country. And then remember, we need an improved Medicare for all. And when I say improved, that's because it has got to include eyeglasses, hearing aids, dental. I'm 71 years old. I wear hearing aids. I wear glasses. I do still work, but I couldn't if I didn't have my glasses. I mean, I can look at you fine, but I couldn't write you a letter without my glasses. I would have a very difficult time now without those hearing aids. Right. So this is what needs to happen.
Right. And let me throw this in, because this is why I believe they should have more town halls. Because I agree with looking at the potentially of a $1,200 minimum, but I'll take it a step further, and I agree with increasing from 160 to 250 or maybe even 300,000. But we also need to look at, let's face it, many of the corporations have moved away from W-2s purposely, and they use stock options. We should be taxing stock options. Absolutely. We should be taxing more than just the W-2s, because they figured out that if I can use a different system to get away from the system, we're killing it. The other thing is, I'm a person that that took my retirement at 62. There's a cap of $25,000. Let's be realistic on there. There are people who need to take their early, but that number should be around $65,000 to $70,000. Because you see, if you have a business, which I do, I can make money that is not W-2. But the people who need to work the most and actually need their Social Security to survive, they're penalized at $25,000 at a $1 for $2 system. This system was created in the 40s and the 50s or something, but it's antiquated. So not only should we look at increasing the end point for Social Security for W-2s, we need to increase the amount of money people can make while still getting their subsidy, their Social Security. And these are why it's important that we have town hall meetings and we have educated people and we have people who don't stick to the script. And I appreciate the fact that you're not sticking to the script because, as I said, I didn't come here to hear your script. I came to here to talk to you about the issues that are prevalent to me. So what do you think about those other issues of, like I said, taxing the non-W-2 interests that come from corporate America today?
Well,
And
stock options and stock buybacks were not even legal until Ronald Reagan. A CEO could not be paid with stock options. As soon as a CEO could be paid with stock options, there was an inherent conflict between serving the workers and doing well financially yourself. So everything that you were saying about taxing stock options, I totally agree with. And I agree with why you said it was done, just the different ways to get around the system.
what about the issue of increasing the minimum amount that a person who takes early Social Security from 25,000 up to somewhere around 50 to 60? Because it takes about $75,000-$80,000 just to barely stay as middle class.
I find it interesting. I have not read about it or thought about it, but it's interesting. But I would have to sort of do more thinking about it and learning about it before I would say anything. Sounds right, but I can't say that from a place of having really thought it through or read about it. But
Okay,
now
well,
you say it, it's
please
like, oh, yeah.
please investigate it because
Yes,
those are
thank you.
issues that you'll find the average person to be able to collect some Social Security while they worked to stay
Right.
middle class would be a blessing
Yeah.
to these people who are struggling right now to basically even have 3 meals a day and have a roof over their head.
Right.
And again, you would actually be strengthening the Social Security because they would still be paying Social Security for the work
Yeah.
that they're working,
Good
along
point.
with getting some of the funds that allow them to now be destitute.
Right.
So great. Now, the next question I wanted to ask you again, uh, homelessness right now. Uh, Black people have the highest percentage of homelessness in America. Now, homelessness for everybody, not just veterans and not just women, and not homeless is a key issue. Oh, and I'm sorry, I gotta switch back to something too. I want to go back to the comments you made and just correct people. Uh, you were talking about women who do not, but you also have the war on drugs that put a lot of Black men in prison for so long that by the time they get out, they have not reached the minimum of Social Security. So it's great to focus on women, but when you look at certain, again, I'm fortunate. I'm a Black man who's never been incarcerated, but the war on drugs has decimated my brothers and sisters to the point where many of them will also not be eligible for Social Security or even minimum Social Security. So I ask you in the future to think about not just women, but there are men sitting out here, especially African American men, because of the war on drugs, because of the long incarcerations, because of the way the system is set up for them. They are in as bad, if not worse, conditions as women, as other people. And we need to start including them in our discussions and make sure that the recognition is that it is, like I said, this is more than veterans. This is more than everybody. Everybody hurts the same, and everybody needs to be recognized that we are all hurting. Just a comment for that.
Well, in terms of the $1,200, as I said, that's men or women. I am
Yeah.
concerned about women, but that's men or women. However, in addition to that, it is core to my platform, and I hope that people will go to Marianne2024.com, look at the issues page,
Mhm.
because ending the war on drugs is a core principle in my campaign. It was begun in 1971 by Richard Nixon. He knew that drugs was not a public enemy number one, as he called it. It was a total political ruse and was, in part, in large part, an attack on Black communities. We spent $1 trillion over it. on the war on drugs. It clearly has not solved the problem. It has exacerbated it. And it has, in exactly the way you just described, fed the prison industrial complex, because almost half of all federally incarcerated people are nonviolent drug offenders. We know that Black Americans and white Americans use drugs at the same level, but on the issue of drug use, as well as every other crime, a Black person is more likely to get a roughly 20% longer prison sentence. So we need to end the war on drugs. We need to take the $100 billion that we're spending right now, take a fraction of that and use it to build a world-class network of recovery options. We should not be treating it as a criminal issue. We should be treating it as a health issue, like they do in nations such as Portugal. And everything that you just said was absolutely true. When you look at who the people are, who are mainly there for nonviolent drug offenses, and as I say all the time, they should be home raising their children.
And it destroys their opportunity to even
Absolutely.
have Social Security and some
Oh, and
type of
it destroys chances for families and children,
exactly
right? All of the above,
all
all
of
of
them.
the. So I
Okay.
just wanted you to know the war on drugs is already, and also it feeds the monster at the border.
Mhm.
Because if we end the war on drugs, this will put a dent in the black market that the drug cartels are able to take advantage of. So
Absolutely.
I see this as a major issue, ending the war on drugs.
Great. So now back to what I wanted to ask you again. Homelessness and also housing, having affordable housing kind of run true and two. Many times when people want to talk about homeless, they want to talk about mental issues and drugs, and that is a big section. But more and more, people are homeless because they have to make a decision of whether I can feed my family or live on the streets. And they're living on the streets because they cannot afford to live somewhere else. We've gotten to the point where major corporations are buying up. They're literally buying up communities. We're in a place where major corporations have turned housing into a commodity. In the past, generational wealth was basically fueled by owning your own home and an appreciation that was at a specific level, so that if you were able to die and leave something to your family, it was that home, and it was able to give them a start, a little bit better start. They've decimated the Black communities because with the way housing has been set down and gentrification but has been put in place, many Black communities are being completely swallowed up and replaced with communities that they can't afford to live in. You look at a place like the historic West Side here, you look at the fact that there is a look of gentrification, and the biggest fear is the people who were forced before the 1960s to live on the historic West Side because they weren't allowed to live anywhere else will be in a situation where they can't even live there anymore and they're homeless. So we have to figure out, give me your thoughts on that. Affordable housing, number one, to me, is not low income housing. It's first time home buyers. It's the ability to get into a home where if the average mean is $60,000, they are for income, and your housing is $400,000. That's a recipe for high homelessness. That's a recipe for putting people in a position where they're either renter slaves. In other words, they'll never be able to own something, and they're forced to be rent driven, which will always deplete them because of inflation. So give me your thoughts on that. How do we deal, or what's your thought on both the I'd say the corporate purchase of single family homes, and how do we deal with creating affordable housing that people can live and buy in to offset higher homelessness?
Once again, at Marianne2024.com, I hope people will look at both my economic bill of rights, which includes the right to affordable housing, and also my housing policy. the crisis has turned into an emergency at this point. As you said, we've got 600,000 people on any given night in the United States who do not have a roof over their head. We need 10 to 20 million units of social housing. We need a tenant's bill of rights. In terms of the commodification, the real estate commodification of housing that you were talking about, we need to tax these people up the wazoo. And if the taxation itself does not work, we need to pass a law that says if somebody is would live in that house, they have first dibs on it. Right? So we need basically a domestic Marshall Plan for housing in the United States.
Okay.
This goes back to what you were saying, Brian. This is what happens when vulture capitalism has no soul. So if you're going to put Wall Street profits before whether someone in 30-degree weather or 20-degree weather with a child is out on the street, who are we? Who have we become? We have a lot of young people in America who are going to community colleges and living in their car. We have many people who are homeless in America who work full-time. So we have to see it as part of a comprehensive breakdown. It's not housing or war on drugs or lack of health care. It is what has happened when you've allowed this unfettered capitalist system to become your false god.